Millionaire financier Jeffrey Epstein once rubbed shoulders with the world's rich and powerful. In 2008, he became a convicted sex offender, found guilty on 2 counts of solicitation of prostitution, one of these with a minor. After 13 months in prison, he was released and no federal charges were laid. A decade later, a Miami Herald reporter published an expose on Epstein, speaking to a number of his victims. It sparked a federal investigation.
I was 16.
I was 16. I started going to him when I was like 14 turning 15.
In July 2019, Epstein was arrested on charges of sex trafficking.
He knows exactly what he's done, and I hope he comes clean about it.
He pleaded not guilty but never faced trial after being found dead in his jail cell a month later. It was ruled as a suicide. Now his longtime associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, is facing criminal charges for recruiting teenage girls for Epstein. Her trial is expected to take place in November. She's pleading not guilty. Julie K. Brown is the reporter who broke the story and has a new book out called Perversion of Justice. Julie Brown, when you went back to look at the Jeffrey Epstein case, you realised that the missing voices were those of the victims. Why do you think that was?
Well, they didn't. The prosecutors the state prosecutors, of course, handled the case and dropped the ball. And then the Department of Justice federal system took over the case. And from the get-go, they didn't ever treat these women as victims. Remember, they accepted money for doing this. So in their mind, in any way, they thought, that these girls would be viewed by the jury if they would take it to trial as prostitutes. Now, keep in mind that these were 13, 14-year-old girls, number one. And number two, this was not a transactional exchange where they went to the girls and said, we want to have sex with you and you're going to get money for it. They used fraud and coercion in order to get the girls to do this. They weren't upfront about what he was doing. They sort of tricked them by saying, you're just going to give this guy a massage. So that's the problem with their argument. But they nevertheless, even to some degree intimidated these victims by telling them or implying that they had broken the law.
You document an horrendous pattern of authorities overruling investigators who thought they had a pretty watertight case. Was that just corruption, or is there some systemic bias in the system?
The kind of corruption that this involved was not a suitcase full of money being exchanged under a table. This is the kind of corruption that isn't necessarily on the books as a crime, but it's corruption of the entire system, that when you have a wealthy man such as Epstein be able to use his money and his influence to manipulate the system the way he did.
And that seemed to involve things like star names, like lawyers like Alan Dershowitz and Ken Starr rolling into town and sort of bamboozling the local authorities.
The things that they were pointing to were just things that, all teenage girls were involved in. They were drinking beer, they were, experimenting with sex. They were using foul language, those kinds of things. And somehow Epstein's lawyers put this in front of the prosecutor, and the prosecutor started having cold feet about, taking on this case.
You contend in your book that a lot of this has got to do with class.
Epstein could have had the most expensive prostitutes ever. I mean, he had the money to buy, very good hookers, but he didn't want that. His thrill was to target and prey upon vulnerable girls. In most cases, these girls came from homes where their parents were working 2 and 3 jobs. They weren't around. In some cases, their parents were addicted to drugs. They were in foster homes. A couple of them even ended up on the street. So these were the kind of girls that he preyed upon.
After his death, we saw some of the victims speak out, understandably angry that he wasn't going to face justice. I presume you're still in touch with them. How are they dealing with things now?
They're still angry. That this almost lets him off the hook in another way. mean, they are prosecuting Ghislaine Maxwell, his longtime girlfriend. The victims worry that this is an out for prosecutors. In other words, let's put her away and then let's just wrap up the case and it's all better. And we don't have to get into the messiness of who, what, where, did he get other people involved. Thus far, she is taking a page out of the Jeffrey Epstein defense playbook. She's hiring a lot of lawyers, throwing a lot of money at this. And the lawyers are doing what Epstein's lawyers did, which was to try to wear down the prosecutors by filing so many motions and so many legal pages, And I think that in part, that's one of the tactics that she's trying to use.
Thanks so much for talking to us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.